Okay, the Jesuit project of education and missions goes back more than 450 years. And the Jesuits, as you recall, were the leaders of what was called the Counter-Reformation. They took seriously the challenge set out by Martin Luther that people need to be educated. They also developed during the time of the Great Exploration, so that the Jesuits were among the very, very first to establish schools, inviting all members of the community, the Roman Catholic community, to take up the project of literacy, to be able to read the Bible, to be able to know and discuss the great legacy left behind by Augustine and by Thomas Aquinas. And the Jesuits were the first to go out into China, into Africa, into India, into Latin America, as Latin America was being established, the first to go to South America, the first to come to the woodlands of the Northeast, the first to come to the upper Midwest, the first to chart the course of how religion could take shape as it was being communicated to the people of the Southwest and of Mexico. And the Jesuits had this brilliant strategy and project. They would station a Jesuit in a place for 15 years until that Jesuit learned the language, learned the culture, and after 15 years, then use your wisdom, use your insight to first think about creating a grammar, creating a dictionary for the local language, and then think about what words, what concepts would work in order to communicate the Christian idea in regard to God. So we find that the Jesuits actually were the first linguists. The Jesuits were the first anthropologists of the Age of Reason. And the corpus that they leave behind, the Jesuit documents, the Jesuit records, they are invaluable treasures that allow us to have a window to the world, a window to world culture that otherwise would be lost. So the Jesuits carry on in that tradition, and I certainly have benefited immensely from the project that they set forth, knowing that in order for me to understand the world, I had to learn Tibetan, I had to learn Sanskrit, and remain vitally engaged in those languages in order to comprehend this worldview that we now understand to be an enduring gift. And the methods set forth by Jesuit theology, regardless of you're going with original language or not, remains true. That here at LMU, in the Jesuit tradition, you will read primary texts, you'll discuss those texts, you'll talk about those texts in group with your colleagues, with your professors, with your fellow graduate students, and then you'll engage those texts. You'll think about what is the meaning here? What does this say to me? What does this say to the world today? And this is really at the core of Jesuit education, the precept, the insight, the wisdom that we can and will be transformed by our studies. The spirituality of Ignatius requires developing an ongoing course of discernment. And in the spiritual exercises, just as I had performed the Passion day after day, year after year when I was in high school, reflecting on and interiorizing the moments that led to the crucifixion and the ascension of Jesus, so also that becomes a script for how we can reflect on the meaning of our own life in terms of this larger Christian narrative. And what the Jesuit process of discernment invites us to do, as I understand it, is to check in with ourselves on a daily basis and say, have I lived up to my own personal understanding of what has been set forth as the best life I could possibly live? And this doesn't need to be overt, it doesn't need to be like sort of worn on someone's sleeve, but it becomes really a subtext. It becomes a quiet background out of which people take their faith life seriously, and it provides a way for that discernment process to become part of really the fabric of how we engage the world through the prism of spirituality, not doing what we're told to do, but being very thoughtful about listening to what it is that we really need to be doing.